Hello, dear teachers. Welcome to a new lesson on materials development. The topic of today's lesson is authenticity, authentic versus contrived materials. And the purpose is to familiarize ourselves with the conceptualization or conceptualizations of authenticity and also significance of authentic materials. We have always talked about the significance, the centrality of authentic materials, authentic texts, and tasks. And I have always heard from novice teachers and also expert teachers that the materials used in many educational contexts and settings are contrived, artificial, and non-authentic. But what is authentic? What are authentic materials? What are the features, the advantages of authentic materials? Uh, Up to now, we have discussed the centrality of authenticity, um, actually considering general and also um, very um, unspecific, actually, um, issues and topics we have considered when we were talking about the significance and centrality of authenticity. If you want to understand authenticity and if you want to evaluate materials in terms of authenticity, some critical issues should be considered. What are those issues that today we are going to actually study and discuss? Here, let me first introduce one of the sources that you need to study, one of the best sources, authentic materials and authenticity in foreign language learning by Alex Gilmore. This is one of the state-of-the-art articles. A state-of-the-art article means that all the ideas, findings, and studies in the literature actually have been summarized in this article. You can find all the possible notions, findings, information, and ideas discussed so far in the literature, in the related literature. So study this actually source, and I'm sure that you will learn many things about language learning, language teaching, and also materials development and also teachers teaching. But let's conceptualize authenticity. What does it mean by authenticity? The materials developed by native speaker teachers are necessarily authentic, or the materials developed by non-native speakers are unauthentic and contrived materials. What is and what are your definitions of authentic texts and authentic tasks? What source of materials, texts, and tasks you define, you consider, you evaluate as being authentic? Think about your own definitions. Think about your own ideas. Okay, I have provided you with some conceptualization and some ideas. These ideas are not necessarily preferred to the other one, but I will provide you with actually the finalized conceptualization with one of the preferred ones, which I myself actually prefer to use that one when I am teaching or talking about authenticity. The first one, The language produced by native speakers for native speakers in a particular language community. So the language produced by native speakers for native speakers in a particular language community. So do you believe in this one? What do you think about this definition or conceptualization? What about other language? Other language produced by non-native speakers, but they are proficient speakers, produced for real purposes. Aren't they authentic materials? Materials are necessarily, or authentic materials are necessarily produced by native speakers, for native speakers. So this is the first definition or conceptualization. This is the most prevalent one, but let's consider other ones. The language produced by a real speaker or writer for a real audience, conveying a real message. So I think the second one is much more better, because language is always used for real purposes, for real speakers, even the speakers who are not non-native speakers, but they use language for real, actual purposes. But they are proficient speakers. They do not use distorted language, they use natural language. So I prefer this one, and this one is preferred also by Gilmore, because the language which is used by a real speaker for the real hearer, for the real purpose, or for the conveying a real message. It means that even if a native speaker, when produces a sentence and insert that sentence in a textbook, because the sentence which is produced by native speaker has not been produced for real purposes, to convey a real message, okay, for real actually addressee or hearer, it's not what authentic, because the native speaker artificially produced that sentence. Even the native speaker has contrived or concocted or produced a sentence, not for real purpose, for educational purpose. Okay, so it's not bad to produce sentences, create sentences or utterances or messages for educational or instructional purposes. But authentic material means language produced by a real speaker for a real message, for a real hearer. Number 3, the qualities bestowed on a text by the receiver, and that it is not seen as something inherent in a text itself, but it is imparted on it by the reader listener. Okay, this one is a little bit different. It means that all messages, all passages, and all language produced are authentic if the hearer, if the listener, if the addressee can easily smoothly interact with that text. For example, a sentence, an utterance, a passage produced by native or non-native speakers. If that is interesting, if that one is interactive, if that one is purposeful for the reader, and if the reader or listener can successfully interact with that message, language, or passage, so then we can claim that it is authentic. Yes, all authentic messages should be interacted successfully by the readers and listener. But this definition is not a little bit simple and easy or reader friendly, But the meaning is this one. Let's consider the other one or the other ideas. Okay, now the fourth idea about authenticity. The interaction between students and teachers and is a personal process of engagement. Here, the actually producer of this idea believes that in educational context, if students and teachers successfully interact with each other, so then we can say that their interaction between them is authentic. So it is personal process of engagement. It means that if the teacher successfully engages students in the process of communication and interaction, then it is going to be an authentic interaction. Yes, this is true, but it only refers to the communication between teacher and student. But sometimes students need to do self-study or study some text or use some tasks or exercises. Number 5, the types of tasks chosen. This one again refers to the task, or actually not the texts or passages or communication or interactional activities. It only refers to the task. It means that the task should be real life tasks, real life problems. If you use real life problems, so then we can say that they are authentic. And finally, the social situation of the classroom. This one refers to the social situation of the classroom. If the social situation of the classroom is natural, it is similar to real life situation, so then we can say that authentic interactional activities are happening in the classroom. But putting these ideas together, we come to the next definition. Okay, no, there are two more definitions. Bachman and Palmer, and Lequish 2000 refer to assessment. Yes, assessment means authentic when in our items or in the questions we insert in the actually assessment real life actually problem, real life tasks. You know that when we assess our students, we should use some tasks. Yes, those tasks, if they are real life tasks, so then we can say that they are authentic. Let me give you an example. For example, when suppose that you're teaching listening and speaking, yes. So suppose that you're teaching listening and speaking. Some teachers chose to teach pronouncing some vocabulary items or producing isolated sentences or phrases. But in real world context, the students need to take part in interviews. According to Bachman and other scholars, if you want to assess a student's learning, development of speaking and listening, you should create a situation for interview, and you should interview your students. Then, if they successfully interview or perform in their interview, so it means that you have successfully taught listening and speaking, and they have successfully learned listening and speaking. Again, The questions of vocabulary items, question of producing simple sentences or phrases are not real-world tasks. And if you include these items in your assessment, or your assessment consists of these ones, so then it is not real world, because things like that never happen in real world situations, so it's not going to be authentic. Next one, culture and the ability to behave or think like a target language group in order to be recognized and validated by them. So here, this one refers to culture, to lifestyle, to behavior, and the ability to behave or think like a target language. You have always heard that if you're learning English, you should think like native speakers. You should behave like native speakers. Actually, this one is not that much actually accepted, because you can learn language, you can learn about and also learn their lifestyles, but it doesn't mean that you should necessarily behave like them or employ their cultural norms. But knowing about them, or if you want to perform like them, you should be able to do that. Okay, let's go to our finalized, our preferred actually conceptualization of authenticity. An authentic text is a stretch of real language. Here we have the word a stretch of real language. So language is real. It is a stretch of, a stretch means a continuous form, not a single sentence, not a single vocabulary. It may be a sentence, it may be actually an utterance. Utterance means even a sound, even a letter, a clause, a phrase, a word, a prefix, a suffix, okay? An authentic text is a stretch, okay? A stretch, it varies, produced by a real speaker or writer for a real audience and designed to convey a real message of some sort. So the producer is real, the hearer is, the receiver is real, and it carries, it conveys a real message. Okay, let me give you an example. When you're talking to and with your, for example, mom, or with your dad, so you talk about University of Zabul and you talk about your MA studies. So because you really want to talk about that topic to convince your father and mother about your studies or the topics of your studies or university, so even if the language you have produced is imperfect, that is authentic. But when you're teaching language to the kids, to your younger brother or sister, even to your father, you're teaching English to your father. In order to teach something, okay, in order to teach a particular structure, grammatical structure, you have to produce a sentence, for example, present perfect. Now, because you have produced present perfect only for the purpose of teaching, not for the purpose of communication, that is non-authentic, or it is inauthentic. It is contrived, not for real life purposes, not for real life communication. Okay, this is the definition. Now, okay, what are the features, what are the advantages of authentic text, and why we argue that the textbooks should use authentic texts and tasks instead of non-authentic materials. There are some critical issues that we should consider authentic and contrived materials against those issues. First, written and spoken grammar. Okay, what is the difference between authentic and contrived materials? You know that in real life situation we have two types of grammar, two types of discourse, written and spoken grammar. If you use authentic materials, okay, you use the real grammar, it makes no difference. Spoken grammar or written grammar, you use whatever grammar which has been used in producing that text. Okay, it may be spoken grammar. It is you focus on the natural grammar. Okay, but when for educational instructional purposes you want to teach a speaking and listening or a spoken text, you need to contrive materials and produce passages. For example, dialogues. But those dialogues are only in form of a spoken dialogues. They are only appear to be a spoken text, but you use written grammar to produce a dialogue. Dialogue is spoken, but you have used a written grammar to use it. Okay, it is easy to understand this one. Consider the textbooks developed and designed for Iranian high school students and learners. What you can see, you see that there is some dialogues and conversations written by Iranian materials developers. You can understand easily that the grammar used or the language used in those dialogues are not a spoken grammar, they are written grammar. What happens here? When you provide your students with those dialogues, the students can only read those dialogues. The students can only learn those grammars because they are a spoken practice of written grammar. Our duty, our role is to provide students with a spoken practice of a spoken grammar, not written grammar. So what happens? What is the consequence? Whatever students are learning will never be used in the future course of action, because in real life situation, students see that the grammar used for speaking is different from what they have learned. So what happens again? A mismatch between teaching and learning happens here. That's why the Iranian students, after 6 years of learning language, are not even able to even produce one spoken sentence or utterance. This is the problem. Some people may think that now students are lazy. Students do not pay attention. This is the problem. Students, they have learned many sentences, but the sentences are not spoken, because if you ask them, they may write a sentence, an utterance. But when you ask them to produce oral, actually, utterances, messages, they fail. This is one of the problems. The other one is choice at this. Okay, about the first one, let me stress the important point that when we use authentic materials, the grammar is natural, the discourse is natural. Okay, so for a spoken actually language, spoken grammar is used. Written grammar, text written grammar is used. So you can use both of them in authentic materials. The language grammar is not distorted. But when you use contrived materials like Iranian textbooks, So you distort language, you change the grammar for actually when you are using, for example, speaking, listening, reading, and writing. So it's better to use authentic materials. Here is authentic materials actually have priority over contrived materials. Next one, choices at discourse level. In real life situation and in authentic materials, the language is at discourse level. But you see, okay, in the near future we will evaluate the materials developed for Iranian high school and junior, senior high school students. You see that the language is sentence-based language, not discourse-based. Discourse means a stretch of language, a continuous stretch of language. It may be an utterance, even a sound, even a sentence, but it is actually it is used for real life interaction. It is okay. For example, when I ask you which of the following sounds is fricative, yes, f and b. You may only say f, yes? Okay, I may ask you which one is sound? Which one is, I'm sorry, which one is a voiced sound? P, b. Okay, you may say only one sound. You may say b. You may say b is sound. You may say b is sound, but p is not sound. I'm sorry, b is voiced, p is not voiced. So you may produce a single sound, you may produce a single sentence, or two sentences, or a paragraph. All of them are considered as discourse level because they are real. But in contrived materials, like the passages and the text used in Iranian textbooks, they are only sentence-based language. You may see some paragraphs, but the paragraphs are not really paragraphs. Isolated sentences have been actually physically put together and they formed a paragraph. But in real life situation, this is not the sentences to be put physically together to form a sentence. The message is important. The idea is important. So in authentic materials, the language is at discourse level. But in contrived materials, the language is at sentence level. When the language is at sentence level, communication it does not matter. So students do not learn communication and do not focus on what meaning. The other important issue is formulaic language. You know that in real life, in real language, half of the language, or 1 out of 3 of the language features are formulaic. Formulaic means lexical bundles, a group of words coming together, or collocations. They are usually called lexical bundles or phrases, the words coming together. Okay, what are the advantages of using formulaic language? When, for example, learn 4 words that come together, or 3 words that come together as a single item, so it is easier to process it, and it is easier to learn it, and it is easier to use them. For example, when you are writing, the purpose of this study, yes, the purpose of this study the purpose of this study. How many words? The purpose of this study. 5 words come together. If you learn these items as discrete items in isolation, so you should think whether purpose should be used, whether the should be used, whether of should be used, this should be used, or a study should be used. Okay, so you are always in doubt to put them together or not, or use other words. But here, when you learn the purpose of this study, in all studies, in all research papers, this is used. The purpose of this study, yes, you can easily write, you do not doubt, you are not in doubt whether of should be used, there should be used, or purpose or objective, which one should be used. Okay, so you learn them together. So it is easier to process, it is easier to learn, it is easier to remember, and it's easier to use them. Okay, the point is that if you want to compare and contrast authentic materials with contrived materials, authentic materials include formulaic expressions, but contrived materials include isolated vocabulary items or expressions. So what happens here? What happens? You learn isolated words, and learning isolated words are difficult, remembering them are difficult, putting them together is difficult, and your language use, when you use isolated words to put them together, the language you use is not native language. The language you use is different from what native speakers or professional speakers use. So you think that you have learned many things, but you cannot use them. Then you may think that it is because of your limitations as a learner and as a language user. You may think that you are lazy. You may think that you are not a smart language user, and there are some problems with your actually memory. There are some problems with your actually intellectual abilities. So formulaic language expressions or language is important. Okay, let's go to the okay, here I need to change the numbers. Let me change the numbers. Okay, pragmatic competence. Pragmatic competence, you remember that pragmatic refers to when we use some actually vocabulary items, some structures, some sounds, some letter, some features of language instead of other ones. Okay, the reasons for which we use or prefer some to other ones is called pragmatics. For example, instead of hello, we say hi. Why we have preferred hi? Because we want to show that we are intimate, because we want to show that we are behaving friendly, or to show closeness. So these things, or appropriateness of language, refers to pragmatics, and pragmatics is the most important actually perspectives of language or dimension of language. In contrived materials, you cannot find a reason for the language preferred or used by the writer, because they have always tried to put or insert grammatically correct items, not socially appropriate items. And they do not tell you anything about the preference of one to the other ones. Okay, that's important. In authentic materials, appropriate language has always been used, and you are provided with the opportunity to experience uh, natural language features, you have the ability, the opportunity to discover actually pragmatic features of language, or you can unintentionally learn or incidentally learn appropriations of language. Anyway, in contrived materials, not only nothing is said about pragmatics of language, but the students are deprived of pragmatics. They are deprived of the experience with natural language use or appropriate language use. The other one is interpersonal function of language. The point here is that language is used for two purposes: interactional purposes, interpersonal purposes, or for transactional purposes. Interactional purposes means that when you produce a sentence, you do not want to only convey a message or to convey a factual message. Or, for example, when you're talking about weather, both of you actually know about that weather, yes? But you produce something about, you talk actually about weather because you want to make the other one friends, because you want to greet, because you want to start a conversation. So in natural context, we use language first for interpersonal relationship, for creating personal relationship. As a teacher, I may use different sentences or different ideas to provide you with comments and feedback. But why I prefer some of them actually instead of other ones? Because my personal relationship with you actually to create a positive impression about the lesson, to positive impression about my teaching. Okay, so you do the same thing. You have the ability to use different messages, sentences, or features of language to communicate with me. But why you prefer some features to the other ones? Because the personal relationship you want to create with your teacher or your classmates is much more important than the transactional purposes. Sometimes the sentences you produce actually are not only for in order to actually convey some factual information. Factual information are not that important, or the language used by husband and wife, or son and his mother, a daughter and his father, her father, is more interactional or interpersonal than to be transactional, because they know they are familiar with the factual information, but they just want to show that they are caring about themselves. They are actually take care of, okay, those topics, those problems and issues and something like that. In Actually, suppose or consider the textbook written for Iranian junior and senior high school students. What you can see, all the sentences are there to convey convey factual information, factual pieces of information. They are not there for interactional or interpersonal communication. So the contrived material is natural. Authentic materials are natural, and you see that if the text is used or language is used, it has actually the potential to be used as transactional and actually interactional actually language, or it serves both interactional and transactional purposes. Okay, the other one is genre. In contrived materials, only a single genre is used. The language, you know that, the language used for joking, the language used for storytelling, for commenting, for argument, for opinion, for gossips, Okay, the language actually, or the languages are different. But in contrived language, in contrived text and materials, only one form of text is used for joking, one form of text is used for storytelling, or the similar or the same kind of text is used for all of these actually kind of communication. But in authentic materials, joking includes the language of joking. Comments includes language and features of commenting or the moves and steps of commenting. Or argument has the form of argument. Arguments have the moves and steps of argument, the functions of arguments. But in contrived materials, only the form, the appearance is common, or the content is common. But the moves, the steps, the functions, okay, or the grammar is not what it should be. What is the consequence, or what are the consequence? The consequence is that you learn language and you misguidedly learn that when you're joking, you should use the same language that you have used for argument. Then, when you are storytelling, you should use the language or the structures or the moves and steps that you have used for argument. So, your joking, storytelling comments are similar to arguments. So, what happens here? That your language uses or your communication is not going to be native like or proficient or natural. It is not normal, it is artificial. Then what again happens? What happens is this: you cannot make yourself understood, and you cannot understand others, because opinions are different from gossips, arguments are different from comments. Let me give you another example. You're writing an official letter and a friendly letter. The language and the moves and the steps, the format, the content of official letter is different from a friendly letter. Okay, so if you use the language, moves and the steps of official letter for friendly letters, then your friends ask you, are you crazy? Are you mad? You're writing this way? What is happening to you? What has happened to you? So these things are very serious. In contrived materials, genres are missing. When students are deprived of natural genres, okay, so they only focus on language items, and in the future, in the real life situation, when it comes to use language, they cannot use language for the particular purposes to serve their needs and purposes. Now there are some other actually um, critical issues. Decontextualized language, yes, in control materials, language actually is used in decontextualized. Your language is decontextualized. A specificity of language classroom. This one refers to the fact that, for example, consider Iranian textbooks. They tries to, for example, localized language they have used. Okay, so they say that yes, this class is for Iranian language learners, so it is specific to Iranian actual language learners. So we should put or insert language which is specific to Iranian culture and actually lifestyle. Then trying to localize, they use distorted language. Again, authentic materials actually are better if you correctly and appropriately localize those actually authentic materials, but contrived materials localize the language or the situation or the messages, the topics. What happens? Distorted language is used. Okay, ownership of language. Again, this is similar to specificity of language learning, language classroom. Iranians sometimes want to say that they are owner of the language or English that they are going to learn, as they try to put local topics or to localize materials. Um, in this way, they want to show their ownership, but they may use distorted language. So they should be careful about not using distorted language. Again, if for these two cases, if you use authentic materials, but localize them correctly and appropriately, authentic materials, or modify authentic materials, it's better to use contrived materials. Again, intercultural competence. If we use contrived materials, we only focus on our own culture. We deprive our students with intercultural context. When we use, for example, the language produced by proficient speakers from Japan, from China, from Iraq, from other countries of the world, so students familiar themselves with intercultural actually features and assumptions and beliefs and things like that. The other one is motivation. It is believed that authentic materials are more motivating because gradually students think that um, whatever they are learning is exactly whatever they are going to learn to use in their future courses or action, and then gradually they find out, okay, whatever they have learned are specifically used, they are actually strongly used by themselves for successful communication and for successful interaction. When they assess whatever they have learned, when whatever they use for communication, and when they see that they successfully communicated and participated in interactional activities, then they become more motivated, and there is a match between whatever they are learning and whatever they are using or they need to use or they will use in the future course of action. Okay, so to put it in a nutshell, I would like to say that authentic materials should be preferred to contrived materials because authentic materials actually there are some advantages to using authentic materials, and I tried to consider some critical issues when I actually was talking about the advantages of uh, authentic materials. Think about authentic materials and also think about the materials developed for Iranian high school students. And this may be one of your actually one of the questions you may be asked to provide solutions or answers in your final exam actually session, or the question is this, the task is this, that if you want to evaluate Iranian, actually the textbooks developed for or used for Iranian high school students, evaluate those materials in terms of authenticity, and you should consider these ideas or these actually issues and then evaluate them. And also you need to talk about the consequences of using contrived materials in Iranian actually textbooks developed and used for Iranian high school students. Thank you for your attention. Have fun.